Oh, it's another day here at the Comeback Team Studios, and this is your boy, Bek Lover, and welcome to another episode of Interesting Times with Bek Lover. I gather all the most interesting news and headlines around the world, and I compact them into a nice little session for you so you don't have to scroll around trying to find what's going on in this crazy world that we live in. So hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends and family, I take care of all the homework so you don't have to. So welcome again to Interesting Times with Bek Lover, my newest podcast, available on every podcast platform. You can watch me on YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify. There's a lot going on in the world that we live in. It's good to stay ahead and know what might be coming your way. So let's get into it, friends. Interesting times indeed, my friends. The world that we live in, where reality can be a lot stranger than fiction or any movie we've ever seen in our lives. If you haven't figured that out in the last few years of the world that we live in, especially in places like New York City, where I'm from, where every day I feel like I'm in a Batman comic, except Batman's not coming. There's no one coming to save us, New York. Only we can save ourselves. This beautiful city of mine that's been turned into a circus. Up is down and down is up. And the people that run it think that we're stupid. A lot of us are, but this New Yorker is not. God help our city. The Black Plague was one of the worst plagues in the history of humanity that was ever recorded. It wiped out, I think it was half of Europe's population. Well, I got some good news for you. They've discovered it in New Mexico. Someone's just died from it. We'll cover that story a little bit later. And we're going to talk a little bit about the catastrophe that's going on in Sudan, the largest global famine. The whole population, 90% of them are starving to death. And we need to do more for these people that are in need. It is our duty. Again, hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you pay attention to everything I want to tell you, because it'll be beneficial to you and probably the rest of the world. So let's get into the articles now, and let's see what is going on. The United Nations Security Council, reported by Al Jazeera, calls for a ceasefire in Sudan during Ramadan. Fighting has forcibly displaced more than 8 million people, with millions more in need of food and humanitarian aid. The United Nations Security Council has called for a ceasefire in Sudan to coincide with the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and allow aid to get to 25 million people in desperate need of food, with the humanitarian response at its breaking point. 14 countries on the 15-member council on Friday backed the resolution proposed by the UK, with only Russia abstaining on the vote that called on all parties to the conflict to seek a sustainable resolution to the conflict through dialogue. Fighting has been raging in Sudan since April 15, 2023, pitting the Army General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan against the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, of General Mohammed Hamadan Hamedi Dagalo. Now, it's the holy month of Ramadan. Both of these guys are Muslim. The people that are dying and starving are Muslim. There's even commandments in the Holy Quran that make it like illegal to fight during certain sacred months. And I think Ramadan's definitely one of them. If these two assholes can't stop, at least for the holy month, so that millions of people don't die of starvation, then I don't know. But I don't know what people think. Like, they say, I'm a Muslim, I believe in God, or I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus. And it's pretty clear, like, if millions of people are about to starve, innocent men, women, and children, especially of your own faith. Same thing, Ukraine and Russia, both Orthodox Christian, killing each other. This is not the religion's fault. Do you think Orthodox Christianity tells them kill another Orthodox Christian or any human being for that matter? No, they don't. Do you think in Islam, Allah is going to bless you because millions of fellow Muslims are going to starve and die a slow, miserable death because of your actions? Even if you win whatever you're trying to win, whatever war, what are you going to do when you face that God? The problem is these people do not believe in God. People want to blame religion. It's not the religion, it's the action, it's the free choice, it is the free will of people that choose to do this evil. And people that are not evil need to stand up and stop these types of people. It is not the religions, folks. Every religion teaches a human being to be a good person, to care about their environment, to care about their neighbor, to help those that are less fortunate. And if you're watching and listening to this, if you don't care about fellow human beings, regardless of where they are, then you've lost your humanity. And do you really still believe in God? Probably not. And it's becoming harder to with the world that we see and how dark it's become. More great news. The U.S. jobless rate has hit its highest in the last 2 years. There's more people unemployed now than ever. I'm sure it's because they're doing amazing things with their lives. America's unemployment rate crept up the highest rate in the 2 years this last month. The jobless rate rose to 3.9%, up from 3.7% in January, even as employers added 275,000 jobs, the Labor Department said. The jump in the unemployment rate was due to an estimated 334,000 more people reporting being out of work. However, the rate remained low by historic standards, and more people also entered the labor force. Average hourly pay was up 4.3% in February compared with a year earlier, rising a modest 0.1% over the month. The report comes amid a presidential election year, and the U.S. Central Bank is debating whether and when to start to cut the current interest rates, reported by BBC. And it is an election year. And for those of you that watched the State of the Union, which I thought was a complete disaster, the guy could barely talk, the guy's rambling. The highlight of that was watching Major Aurora Green, however you pronounce her name, just attacking the president openly, during that session. I found it to be very entertaining, at the same time horrifying, watching the United States of America pretty much collapsing. BBC also reports former rebel Guy Felipe calls for Haiti PM to resign. So right now, Haiti, guys, is like disaster. Gang violence, completely consumed. Basically a civil war. They don't want to call it. There's a civil war going on in Haiti. Okay? Philippe, who returned to Haiti last year after serving a prison sentence in the U.S., told Reuters' new agency that he wanted to be president. That sounds like a great fucking candidate. He's in jail in America, but he wants to be the president of Haiti. Haiti's capital has been paralyzed by gang violence recently, and it escalated dramatically when Mr. Henry left for a regional summit last week. A state of emergency has been extended by a month in Port-au-Prince. Philippe, who was deported back to Haiti in November after serving 6 years of a prison sentence for conspiracy to launder drug money, said Mr. Henry should resign and let Haitians decide their fate. Asked if he wanted to become president, he said, yes, I'm going into politics. This sounds like a guy with a lot of character, a lot of ethics. If I was Haitian, I would definitely want a guy that was convicted of drugs, selling them and all that stuff at a high level. I would want him to run my country. That's the guy. This guy's a genius. This is what's wrong with the world we live in. We allow people that clearly have no ethics, no morals, don't care about their people, don't care about the people they're in charge of, to run our affairs. And when they do horrible things that do not benefit the people of these nations, then we act like, I can't believe they did that. Well, I mean, they kind of told you who they were. This guy's telling you, I sold drugs. I fucking was dealing drugs, which means people probably died because of his actions. And, I want to come back in now that you guys are having a gang civil war. And I want to run the country because I'm the most qualified guy. I mean, I was only in jail for selling fucking drugs. Reuters reports the Houthis target a bulk carrier, U.S. destroyers in the Red Sea. The U.S., French, and British forces downed dozens of drones in the Red Sea area overnight and on Saturday, and Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis targeted bulk carrier Propel, Fortune, and U.S. destroyers in the region. The Houthis have been attacking ships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden since November in what they say is a campaign of solidarity with Palestinians during Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. And this continues to affect global shipping, prices, inflation, you name it. It impacts all of us. And I think the U.S. is probably, if I had to guess, the U.S. is going to invade Yemen, I think, if I had to guess. Reuters also reports one of the survivors of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, atom bomb survivor, hopes Japan's debut of Oppenheimer will stoke nuclear debate. Hiroshima, March 8, Teruko Yahata, was 8 when she saw a bluish-white light envelop the sky over her home city of Hiroshima one summer morning, moments before the first atomic bomb explosion knocked her unconscious and leveled swaths of the Japanese city. She's now 86. She's eager to be among the first to see the film Oppenheimer at its delayed opening in Japan on March 29th, hoping the biopic of the scientist who led the development of the bomb will reinvigorate debate over nuclear weapons. I don't hold a grudge against Mr. Oppenheimer himself or anything like that. It's a much bigger issue, said Yahata, who often speaks on behalf of survivors of the nuclear blast in the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II. I think it's important for the Oppenheimer film to be screened in Japan so we can learn from it and not lose the awareness that we need to preserve a future for our loved ones. The opening in late summer came just weeks before solemn memorials in Hiroshima and Nagasaki held annually to mark the bombings that claimed more than 200,000 lives. And that is what we all want to avoid, a end of the world, nuclear winter. Most of the life gets wiped out, and we have the potential to completely destroy all of us. Speaking of more amazing leaders that do the right thing for their people, NPR reports U.S. court convicts ex-president of Honduras of aiding drug traffickers. It seems like all these people that want to run countries are involved in selling drugs and crime and corruption, and people die because of this, and gangs have free zones where they can do whatever they want, and then they send all their people who are not happy where they live because their country's a shithole because of guys like this fucking guy, and then they think they're going to come to America and things are going to get better. Former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, has been found guilty on charges relating to drug trafficking and weapons possessions in trial by a jury in New York. A New York federal district court convicted the 55-year-old ex-president Friday of 3 counts, including conspiring to import cocaine into the U.S. and to use machine guns and destructive devices. I mean, think about this. And we have a wide open border, and thousands of these people are coming in. And when they're that corrupt at the top, imagine the people that are coming in. Device that unleashes dozens of bullets per second, creating chaos and concerns. Reported by NBC Boston. Police are seeing more firepower on our streets tied to tiny devices known as switches, giggle switches, or machine gun conversion devices. It is a troubling trend being used to quickly turn handguns into machine guns. A switch is about the size of a nickel, and it rapidly increases its rate of gunfire with just one pull of the trigger. Worcester Police Gang Unit, Stephen Roche hasn't seen anything like it in his decades of policing. When I first came on and we had a shooting, we'd go, there'd be 1 casing on the ground, maybe 2. We go now, and like we're seeing some of these officers recovered 18 or 20 rounds at a single scene. He said the biggest concerns are how dangerous they are, how inaccurate they are, and the amount of damage they can do with one pull of the trigger. In Worcester, the number of shootings has increased across the city. One woman who didn't want to be identified told NBC 10, I was sleeping and all of a sudden we heard a big bang and the bullet went through our window, ricocheted off our wall and into our bed. Right now, switches are one of the biggest worries. When one is attached to a gun, it becomes capable of firing about 1,200 rounds a minute. That's 20 bullets a second out of a fucking handgun. Okay, do you think 3D printers are a good idea? Pence urges Congress to pass bill banning TikTok in the U.S. Enough is enough. For those of you that don't remember this asshole, he looks straight out of a movie. I mean, he spits to me. His image is like the fakest human being on earth, the head of a corporation that's evil. This guy I never liked him. For all I know, he had me set up and had my friend Angel Fernandez killed. He gives me those types of vibes, you know, like when you meet someone, you just can't stand them and you just know that something's wrong with them. That's this guy. The era of appeasing the Chinese Communist Party is over. What? After they already got everything that we had, they got all our secrets, all of our technology, all of our fucking jobs. They make everything we used to make. They built their military to superpower aptitudes. Now we're worried about it. Now this is when you guys are worried. I mean, we've had their spies in our companies, like that story I reported on the last episode of Interesting Times with Bek Lover, which is why you should be subscribed to this channel and you should pay attention because we go back to things and we teach you things. But now that they have all of our secrets, all of our companies gave them all the technology, All the American workers lost jobs. Everything got outsourced to places like China. Now that they've learned everything that we can do and they don't need us, now we're worried about a little website. We're worried about TikTok. Now you're worried. This is what you're worried about? You're worried about TikTok now? They're not worried about TikTok. They know that the American people are worried about the rising giant known as China that does not give a fuck about its own people, has 2 million people in fucking concentration camps known as the Uyghurs. Okay, ethnically cleansed 2 million people. And they have not had a great track record in human rights. Not that my country's any better because we just go and blow other people up. But now he's worried about TikTok. The American government's worried about TikTok now. Congress should pass legislation forcing the sale of TikTok as soon as possible, and President Biden must immediately sign it into law. So we've been seeing this story. Now, if you're someone that shakes your ass and your titties on TikTok, and that's how you make a lot of your money, you might want to start using other platforms or building them up faster. They've been talking about this ban for a few years, and they might just do it. They probably just don't like the guy that owns it. He probably didn't give them enough briefcase money, because that's all it's really going to take. For the owner of TikTok, all right, you guys want to ban my shit? Here's a couple briefcases under the table. Here's a couple donations to your fucking campaign. I promise you, TikTok ain't going nowhere. U.S. senators make a new push to make daylight saving permanent. The Senate unanimously passed the legislation in March 22. Right? I remember hearing this too. And tomorrow, by the way, you push your clocks ahead. We gain an extra hour of sunlight. Spring is on the horizon. Winter's in our rearview mirrors. By God's will, there will be no more snow. The antiquated biannual ritual of toggling between times isn't just an inconvenience. It also has very real impacts on our economy, our energy consumption, and our health. We know the sun will come out tomorrow, so let's make the sun stay out an hour later by making daylight savings time permanent and passing the Sunshine Protection Act. You can bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there will be sun and smiles. We're springing forward, but should have never fallen back. My Sunshine Protection Act would end this stupid practice of changing our clocks back and forth. Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott also called to lock the clock, and I fucking agree. I don't need the extra hour of sunlight at 5 o'clock in the fucking morning when I'm asleep. I need the extra hour of sunlight at 5 o'clock so it gets dark at 5:30 instead of 4:30, and I don't feel like I'm living in permanent darkness and getting worse seasonal depression, feeling like the world is ending on me, like so many of us that battle with seasonal depression. And the best way to get out of that is, if you have money, be a snowbird. Get the fuck out of here. That's how I've always dealt with it. When it just gets too unbearable, I got to be in the sun. But this would help a lot for those of us that suffer from that type of depression. Trump's judge gives Joe Biden big immigration win against Texas, Newsweek.com. A judge appointed by the former president, Trump, sided with one of President Joe Biden's immigration policies in a surprising ruling on Friday. The U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton ruled against Texas on 20 other Republican-led states challenging a Biden administration program that allows as many as 30,000 migrants who are seeking asylum from 4 countries to enter the U.S. on an emergency basis each month. So 30,000 is about 500,000 a year. No problem, let them in. Fuck it, let them in. And then you wonder why I got problems. How the U.S. military is scrambling to build a floating dock for urgently needed aid to Gaza. Even before President Joe Biden announced in his State of the Union address the plans for providing aid to Gaza by sea, the Army's 7th Transportation Brigade and other units were scrambling to pull equipment together. They received their orders before the speech, building a floating dock off the coast to provide food and other desperately needed assistance to the residents of Gaza. The aid is needed because Israel has sharply restricted land routes into Gaza, slowing the flow of aid. I got an idea. We give Israel billions and billions and billions of dollars, which is how they fund these wars. How about we tell the people that we're giving our money to, like, stop shooting for a couple of weeks. We're going to pull in food for these people. I find it a joke that the country that funds this onslaught, on the other hand, wants to act like they're going to try to save the people that they are allowing to be slaughtered. That's all I have to say on that. You already know what's going on. Turkey's Erdogan offers to host Ukraine-Russia peace talks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky remains firm on not engaging directly with Russia on peace talks, despite an offer from the Turkish president to host a peace summit between the two countries, because nobody wants fucking peace. There was never about peace. And I promise you, let this be in the archives. I promise you, this guy will leave the Ukraine in exile. He'll take all the money he made. His people will be either A, fragmented with half of what Russia lets them keep, or Russia's just going to take the whole fucking country. And this guy will not live in Ukraine. Mark my words, this guy will leave like a coward when the time comes. I truly believe that. Or they'll win. Or we'll go into World War III. That's pretty much our three options. Study links microplastics in arteries to huge increase in heart disease and death. Microplastics are everywhere, even in the fatty deposits called plaque that can build up in the arteries and cause heart disease and strokes. This is reported by USA Today. Now researchers in Italy have found that in people with microplastic in the plague clogging their necks and arteries, the risk of heart attack, stroke, or death was 4.5 times higher than in those who plaque didn't contain plastic. Guys, this microplastic shit is really deadly. 4 times more likely to have a heart attack. Think about that. I'm a cardiologist for 3 decades plus. I never envisioned we'd have microplastic in our arteries. This is fucking disturbing. And its presence would accelerate artery sclerosis. Look at me, Mom. Hooked on phonics. Work for me. Artery sclerosis. The study was published in this week's edition of the New England Journal of Medicine. While it was able to link the presence of microplastics to health effects, it does not prove that microplastics cause the increase in deaths and heart disease, as there could be other variables at play. Many studies have shown that tiny bits of plastic, some too small to be seen, can enter the human body through food, inhalation, vape it up, or exposure to the skin, and have been found in the placenta, lungs, liver, breast milk, urine, and blood. Do you think this is why we might have cancer? Do you think we might be having tumors because of plastic getting into our bodies and our systems? It was not designed to be inside of us. We are organic creatures, and these are not organic products. What I mentioned earlier in the start of this show, the first fatal case of the plague in years has been confirmed. Lincoln County, New Mexico, local12.com. I told you I go all over the world and find you the most interesting stories. You're watching Interesting Times. New Mexico health officials reported a man in Lincoln County in New Mexico has died of the bubonic plague. Okay? Not that plague, this plague, the bubonic fucking plague. Okay? This also marks the first reported case in the state since 2021. Symptoms, because they can't write good here on Local 12. Symptoms can include sudden fever and chills, headaches, weaknesses, and then you fucking die a miserable fucking death. Those are the things. If you have like a fever and all of a sudden you're just fucking vomiting, diarrhea, your fucking eyes are bleeding, you probably have the bubonic plague. Now, do I think we could ever have the black plague of the medieval times that happened in Europe? No. They didn't know it was the fleas from the rats that were buying them because they were barely taking showers, by the way, if you go study medieval history. They have a really cool place called Medieval Times. It's nothing like what it really was. You didn't get to sit there and eat chicken. They were fucking starving to death. You go to Medieval Times, you're feasting on chicken, fucking drumstick. You're drinking a fucking icy of your choice. And you're watching some guys fucking acting like they're like, it's nice. It seems like it would be cool, right? I promise you, lived in medieval times. It was not fun, especially in Europe. They were dirty as fuck. Sorry, I'm coming from Europe, I know. Barely bathing. They smelled like shit, and then they had a plague because the fucking fleas were all over them, and they would get bit by the fleas, and they would die these miserable deaths caused by the bubonic plague. Why I don't think that would ever spread this rapidly is because, well, we had some good practice the last few years with everything being shut down. In any event, just be visual. Pay attention. And one last thing. There's a lot of children going to the emergency room because they're taking vitamins and melatonin thinking that it's candy. This is reported by the CDC. Thousands of visits every year. Please make sure your vitamins for your children, for yourself, are secured because a lot of kids are overdosing on vitamins because they do make them delicious. Like I have some melatonins that I take once in a while. They taste like fucking gummy bears. They taste so delicious. My kids beg me for their vitamins. Very dangerous if they don't realize that this can kill them. Make sure you take care of yourselves. This is a quick little weekend episode of Interesting Times with Bek Lover. Make sure you follow. because you need to know what's going on, because it just might save your life one day. I'll see you next time on the Bek Lover channel, and this is Interesting Times with Bek Lover.